Frank and wide, stats and facts, truth on high. SWAT talk where the convo's real. From Texas to Florida, we seal the deal. Just pull up, the vibes are real. Chopping it up, we spin the wheel. Hit the corner of the field, we strategize. Breaking the game down, no disguise. Play by play, we analyze. I wear sharp, we magnify. SWAT talk where the convo's real. From Texas to Florida, we seal the deal. Just pull up, the vibes are real. Chopping it up, we spin the wheel. Wednesdays heat, Sundays ignite. We talking legends shining bright. Back and forth, day or night. This the plug, we bring the light. SWAT talk where the convo's real. From Texas to Florida, we seal the deal. Cats pull up, the vibes are real. Chopping it up, we spin the wheel. Wednesdays heat, Sundays ignite. We talking legends shining bright. Back and forth, day or night. This the plug, we bring the light. SWAT talk when the convo's real. From Texas to Florida, we seal the deal. Cats pull up, the vibes are real. Chopping it up, we spin the wheel.
All right, everybody, what is going on? How y'all doing? Welcome to today's edition of Swag Talk, the show we cover the swag inside and out. Of course, I am your host and tour guide around the swag, C Wells, coming at you, and this is week 10. So we're gonna go ahead and talk about the games taking place on Saturday. So this is it, man. This is what I like to call Championship November. This is the start of the final stretch run of the season. These next couple of weeks are gonna basically seal a deal for each division championship. So, there's it's too early for tiebreakers and all that, but there's heated races on both sides to some degree. So we're gonna talk about the action that takes place. So let's go ahead and get into it, man. We're gonna go ahead and make this happen and get in and get up. First game we're gonna start off with is Southern taking on Arkansas Pine Bluff. This game is purely a pride game. No pun intended because of the Lions. But this game is strictly a pride game. Both teams looking for some kind of momentum. Southern looking for their first conference win, official conference win, because they do have a non-conference win over Valley, but they're looking for their first actual conference win, and they're looking to build some momentum toward the end of the season, maybe finish out strong, and head into the offseason with something. Pine Bluff looking for some clarity, honestly, because this team is kind of, they're like a couple different teams all rolled into one. You have your team that lost to Texas Tech and UCLA. I mean UCA, excuse me, Central Arkansas. You have your team that beat Westgate Christian and Lincoln, and then you have your team that is basically competitive in the SWAC. They did beat Alcorn, but they also have some losses. So you're kind of trying to figure out who this team is. They got blowed out against Texas Southern. They lost by double digits to Pine Bluff. They lost a fairly close game to Groundling, but they're all over the place. And so, it's kind of tough to figure these guys out. And let's look at it. Southern coming in averaging 15.9 points per game. That's basically buoyed by that 35 points that they scored on Saturday. And the 34 they scored against Valley. Other than that, they haven't scored hardly anything. Southern's giving up 37 points per game, so they're last in scoring offense and scoring defense. Pine Bluff comes in scoring 24.8 points per game, and they give up 31 points per game. Again, their numbers are kind of all over the place, but that's what we have to work with. Total offense. Pine Bluff is averaging 363 yards per game. That's seventh in the league. Southern is 11th at 301 per game. Southern averages 5.1 yards per play. Pine Bluff, they average 5.8 yards per play. Southern total defense 439. I think this defense is the biggest disappointment as a whole, out of almost any unit in the conference. Southern defense was considered in the preseason to be one of the top 3 or 4 defenses in the conference, but they have from game one just have not been able to make things happen. They don't force turnovers. They haven't really been able to stop the run or the pass, and that's what finds them at 11th in total defense. Pine Bluff is ninth in total defense at 409 yards per game. Both teams kind of similar, 6.3 yard per play for Southern for Pine Bluff, 6.5 for Southern. So they both giving up almost a they're both giving up almost a first down every time a team run the play. So most teams are in a 2nd and 4 or better at, after one play on first down. So neither defense is doing a good job of slowing down the offenses, and that makes this game kind of intriguing to a degree. Southern 7th in rushing offense at 161 yards per game. They average 4.5 yards per carry. Pine Bluff is ninth at 155 yards per game, 4.8 yards per carry. So again, kind of similar. Rushing defense, Southern is 10th at 189 yards per game. They give up 5.1 yards per carry. Pine Bluff is 11th at 214 yards per game. They give up 5.5 yards per carry. Now, that could be a factor in this game. Um, Southern does have the guy who is basically tops in the league in terms of yardage total on the ground in Trey Holly. He has 729 yards on the ground this season. He averages 91 yards per game, 6 touchdowns. He's one of the top ball carriers in the conference, and so that could be a difference here. If Southern is able to actually establish the runny, I think Holly ranked for 145 on Saturday. You got to get on the ball. He had 26 carries this week. I think he had 21 against Prairie View. Southern has to get on the ball. He leads the league in carries at 123. So he has to touch the football. He averages 5.9 yards per carry. He, like I said, has 6 touchdowns. He has a long 80. He's the guy who can take it the distance at any given time. Pine Bluff does counter with Jalen Jennings. He has 98 carries for 530 yards and 8 touchdowns. Again, some of his numbers are buoyed from those couple games against Lincoln and Westgate. I'm not trying to minimize anybody's impact, but you got to look at it in that aspect. But a guy that can run for that much yardage is a viable back. He's averaging 5.4 yards per carry with a longer 69. So these are 2 teams that have good running attacks in terms of individual guys. Southern does have a couple more guys that they can throw out there. Um, they just haven't been able to consistently move the football. Other than last week and maybe the Valley game, they haven't been able to drive the ball down the field. They've been either a big play or nothing. So for them to have multiple 75-yard drives against a pretty solid FAMU team, that is a positive, and that could help them in this game if they can move the ball on the ground and kind of control this game because they don't pass the ball well. Southern is 11th in passing at 140 yards per game. They only have 4 touchdowns. They only have 4 interceptions as well, which is not that's not a horrible number. Um, but this is a team that doesn't they throw the ball. They off a ninth they're ninth in passing attempts, so they don't really throw the ball a ton. They've been inconsistent in that aspect and not very accurate. Pine Bluff is sixth at 207 yards per game. They have 10 touchdowns, but they have 9 interceptions. So for a defense like Southern that's last in passing defense, which last year they were first in passing defense, this season they averaged 250 yards per game, allowed 15 touchdowns. They have not had an interception. This could be the game. If you're looking for Southern to force turnovers, this could be the game. Christian Peters um, turns the ball over a good bit. He's had multiple interceptions this season. Um, he has 8 of the 9 interceptions this season, so that could be a positive for Southern. But they have to have their offense moving. Ashton Strother is gonna be the starter. Right now he's 11th in the league with 104 yards per game. If he makes some things happen, it's possible for Southern. But if the offense stymies and the defense is on the field a lot, you can hang it up for Southern. Um, like I said, I look at this game as two teams that really need this game, not so much for being in any race, but you need positivity. I think Pine Bluff they're in that spot where they have to start to make some things happen. They're scrappy. Oh, they're trying. That phase is over. If they want to, if they want to be more than that, then they have to win games. Then they have to beat teams that aren't that good. And Southern right now is not a good team. Southern needs this win because they need to try to find something to work for them. They 1-7, 0-4. They need to have something. I really, I have a caveat or whatever you want to call it that I can't pick Southern because they haven't beaten anybody. I don't see anything that makes me feel like that I should pick them to win games right now. So I'm gonna pick Pine Bluff, but I'm gonna pick Pine Bluff in a game that's like 24-23. I don't think it's gonna be a pretty game and probably have a few turnovers. You have big plays here and there for both teams, but I think Pine Bluff may pull this thing out because I just don't have that in me for Southern right now. So that's pretty much that. Next up we have Alcorn taking on Texas Southern. The Braves, they won two straight quietly. Well, not really two straight, but they won a couple games because they just lost to FAMU the week before. So let me not let me not say that they picked up their first conference win against Valley on Saturday. They have won two games, in the last few weeks, and so they're still trying to figure some things out as well. They haven't been where a lot of people thought they would be. It's not for I don't honestly know what it is because they do have a good running attack. Jalen Tolbert's a solid quarterback. The defense has been there at times. They just haven't really, they've had a couple games not go their way. Missed the last second field goal against Prairie View. Had a game against Pine Bluff where they fell behind but battled back. Um, had a lead against FAMU, let it go. Um, so they're not bad. They just I feel like they're hamstrung. Texas Southern is they're pretty hot right now, and so they've won I think what four straight, and they are they're 3-1 in conference. Before they hit that little conference winning streak, this team looked like it was going to be one of the worst in the league. But they are not again they're not a team that's gonna wow you with anything really. They just kind of put their head down and get things done. Defensively, they're very solid. They're second in the league in scoring defense. They're fifth in the league in scoring offense. Defense only allows 20 points per game. Offense 26. Uh, Alcorn is at 21.9 per game on offense, and defense they're at 25 and a half. So both defenses don't really give up a ton of points. Um, Alcorn eighth in total offense at 343 yards per game. Texas Southern is 10th at 325. Alcorn is sixth in total defense at 375. Texas Southern second at 341. Rushing offense, Texas Southern is third at 194 yards per game. They run the ball 265 times. So they definitely want to run the football. Alcorn, right now, they are sixth at 169 yards per game. They run the ball 264 times. So both teams really are teams that want to run the football. So you can kind of expect this to be a lineup and run at you kind of game. I don't think it's gonna be one of those, fancy games where teams try to just, they try to fool you. Both teams in the top half of the conference in carries. So the run game is definitely going to be a factor. Rushing defense, Alcorn is fourth at 148 yards per game. Texas Southern is fifth at 157 yards per game. So they both kind of neck and neck there. Passing game is probably going to be the difference in this game. Neither team throws the ball really well. Texas Southern is 131 yards per game, which is last in the league. They have six touchdowns and five interceptions. Alcorn is ninth at 174 yards per game. They have 10 touchdowns and five interceptions. Passing defense, Alcorn is ninth at 227 yards per game. Uh, Texas Southern is second at 183 yards per game. So they like I say, TSU defense is quietly flying under the radar. I don't think a lot of people really know a lot about this team. They don't have a huge pass rush. Um, Tigers only have 7 sacks this year, which is last in the league. But this defense has just been solid at getting people on the ground. Alcorn is sixth with 11 sacks. Alcorn allows 12 sacks, which is ninth in the league. Texas Southern is seventh with 11 sacks allowed. Um, and so I think this is one of those games where offense is going to be a premium because neither team necessarily, they don't necessarily wow you offensively. Alcorn converts 33% on third down. Texas Southern completes 40%. Alcorn allows the opponents 39% completion rate on third down, and Texas Southern is at 43%. I like I said, I think this is gonna be I think this could quietly be a solid game this week. You have three really good running backs in Ethan Renfro from Texas Southern and Jacorian Sewell and Reggie Davis from Alcorn. All these guys are ranked in the top portion of the conference and in rushing. Sewell is the second leading rusher in terms of yards per game. Renfro is fourth. Davis is 10th. So there's going to be a lot of running in this game. I think the passing games are going to be the difference here. And, that really is going to probably be what makes the difference. Who can make those timely passes? Tolbert or KJ Cooper, which one of those guys can kind of rely on their weapons to kind of maybe make the defenses, respect that so they can, keep their running game going. Jacoby Matthews from Alcorn is the guy who definitely keep an eye out on. And so like I said, I think this is going to be a physical type of game defensively. I think both defenses are going to show up. Like I said, both teams want to run the ball. TSU, they're in a position where they need help to get to the conference championship. But for that to even matter, they have to win this game on Saturday. Alcorn, I really feel like they're at that point where their season can go either way. They have a manageable end of their schedule, probably minus Jackson State. But they kind of have a manageable end to their season. So if they can stack up a couple wins, maybe you can finish, in a decent spot and kind of erase that early portion of the season. But I think TSU going to win this game. Like I said, a lot of their games have been kind of close, minus that Pine Bluff win. A lot of their games have been kind of close. They kind of been in that 24, 23, 20-point range. I think this game will be the same. I think this game is going to be like 27-26. I think Alcorn, I think Texas Southern wins this game. I'm going to say, 27-26. I think both teams are going to try to run the ball at each other and see what shakes. And I think TSU may be able to get the passing attack going a little bit in this game. If they do, that could really help them. And I think they win this game. Next up, we have Alabama A&M taking on Grambling. This game, if you watch my For Entertainment Purposes only video yesterday, then I'm very confused about this game. I know quarterback health is huge on both sides. A&M comes in. Pretty much the top 2 or 3 guys are banged up. I think Eric Hanley got hurt against Bama State. Now I don't know his status in terms of if he's available. I know Corey Brown's been out. I think the 4th string guy kind of got nicked up a little bit. So I think that could be a huge factor because A&M, I think they have the better offense as a whole. Right now they're averaging 29.5 points per game. Grambling is at 25.3. Grambling, so Xavier T said, he had his injury, with respect from his parents and to his parents, they haven't really put out a lot, but, all indications are that he is doing well. So, who knows, if and when he returns, that could, that's not neither here nor there. But they have, Ashton Fry got hurt against Texas Southern. They had a freshman come in for a couple of plays against Jackson State, drove them in the scoring territory. I think a lot of this game hinges on that. Kind of like I said against them again in the Grambling Pine Bluff preview a couple weeks ago. It all depends on the quarterbacks in this game for Grambling because you have a guy who hasn't really played a lot. You're either gonna have to throw him in the water and let him sink or swim, or you're gonna have to scale back some things and help him. And so defensively, I think this game could help. I think Grambling defensively could carry them in this game. Right now, the defense allows 28 points per game. A&M defense allows 36.3. Total defense, Grambling is fourth at 360 yards per game. And A&M's defense is last at 444 yards per game. Grambling ninth in total offense at 338 per game. And A&M is fourth at 378 yards per game. Grambling definitely is a team that wants to run the football. Coach Joseph said that basically since media day. They're not really statistically doing it extraordinarily at 160 yards per game, but they are committed to it. They run the ball 279 times this season, which is the fourth highest. So they're gonna line up, they're gonna run. Trey Bradford is a guy that's gonna get some carries. The quarterbacks all can kind of move. They have a few other backs that can that kind of make some things happen. Byron Eaton and get some carries for you. Um, that that running attack, it depending on, like I said, depending on what's going on with the quarterback, you're probably going to defeat Trey Bradford a lot in this game. A&M, they average 130, 123 yards per game. That's 11th in the league. Maurice Edwards, who was their leading rusher, he went down with injury in the Magic City Classic. Don't really know where he's at. A&M's last in rushing defense at 218 yards per game. So that bodes well for Grambling. 158 yards per game allowed for Grambling. So that they should be fine on that aspect. The difference in this game is the passing attack, and that also hinges on what goes on with the quarterbacks. A&M leads the league in passing at 255 yards per game. Grambling is eighth at 178 yards per game. Now, Grambling's defense against the pass is at fifth place with 202 yards per game, but they have 7 interceptions. They've done a really, really good job of forcing turnovers. This defense typically can get their hands on the ball, and A&M this season has had problems with interceptions. They have 8, which is the second most thrown this season. So depending on who's playing at quarterback for A&M, that could bode well for Grambling. And so this game is another game where I feel like I don't really have a lot of high hopes for points because to me, like I said, a lot of it all hinges on who plays at quarterback. If A&M gets one of their top guys back, that could sway this game a little bit because I think their offense with their top quarterbacks is better than Grambling's offense with a backup. So if either one of those guys are available, then I do move for A&M. If neither one of those guys are available, then this could be a toss up. And I'm operating under the assumption that it's a toss up. A&M, has had success against Grambling in Grambling. They beat them at home. They beat them a few times in a row. But I think Grambling has some momentum, and I think they feel good. I think they can build off of last week and kind of pick up another win. And so I do think Grambling wins this game. I'm gonna say it's gonna be a 3-point game. I'm gonna say 24-21. Grambling, again, like I said, a lot of this all hinges on health of quarterbacks. This could be a game where Grambling scores on a defensive touchdown and a special teams touchdown. They might not score many offensive points, but they do have the ability to score in other ways. So I think that could be a factor here. Next up is Bethune-Cookman taking on Valley. Two teams who, before the season started, I was like, this probably each team one chance of winning a game, but Bethune-Cookman has won. They are on a hot streak, and they find themselves sitting in the midst of the East Division race. Now, where they finish is anyone knows. But at this point, if you'd have told me in week 10, Bethune-Cookman would be tied for first place in the East Division, I'd have called you a damn lie. I'm just gonna keep it 100 because I had zero expectations for this team. Coach Woody and Coach Pimpleton, especially with their offense, has really turned the corner. And when you look at this team in that aspect, you got to give them credit. And defensively they made the plays in most games. The last few games they played better defensively, and so they're still not a defense I trust to go up against a really good offense. But against teams like this, I think they can be fine. Um, Valley is they're kind of there, within touch of a victory, but I think they still have a lot of things to work on. Offensively, they average a 19.9 points per game. Bethune is at 30 points even. Valley, they allow 35.6 points per game. Bethune Cookman is at 33.1. Total offense, Wildcats 434 yards per game. Valley 285. Total defense, Bethune Cookman is at 426 yards per game, and Valley is at 390. Rushing offense, Bethune Cookman they've been really good running the ball with Elijah Scott, Rashawn Brown, Cam Ransom. Um, they have a ton of guys can run the ball. Their receivers can run the ball. Um, they're at 192 yards per game. Valley is at 117 yards per game. Valley hasn't really found that consistent rushing attack. Josh Brown, Norman Taylor, these guys can run the ball, but they just haven't been successful at it consistently. Bethune Cookman is ninth in rushing defense at 176 yards per game. Valley is second in rushing defense at 145 yards per game. So they've been pretty good at stopping the run. Both teams struggle against the pass defensively. Valley 244 per game. Pine Bluff, I always say, well, I always gonna say Bethune Cookman 249 yards per game. Both defenses, 4 interceptions for Valley, 5 for BCU. Passing offense, Wildcats are third with 241 yards per game, and Valley is 10th at 167 yards per game. So you can see the difference between these two teams. Um, and I think this is a game that Bethune-Cookman offense can make it happen. Now they were kind of sleepy a little bit against Pine Bluff last week. Whether it was homecoming or whether they kind of coming up a bye week and a big blowout win the week before, maybe they weren't really locked in. And they kind of, some of it, you gotta give Pine Bluff credit too. They came to play. They made some plays here and there, but I think a lot of what we have been seeing from Bethune in the previous couple of weeks we didn't see early from them, and so I feel like they're gonna be more locked in this week, especially early, because this is a game you don't want to let Valley hang around. You let this team hang around, then you can get beat. At the very least, you can find yourself in a dogfight, and that's not really what you want in a game like this. You want to kind of knock these guys out the box and move on. So I do like Bethune in this game. I think they win it. I'm gonna say 38-10. I think offensively they get what they want. They can run. They're gonna run the ball. Malik Huggins will be more involved this week with the passing attack. They hit a couple of big passes, and the offense will do what they do. Defense will make some timely plays, and I think they get this one done. Valley continue to look for their first victory in conference play. Next up, we have Jackson State heading to Tallahassee to take on the Rattlers of Florida A&M. This game picked up a little bit more intrigue over the weekend. FAMU picked up their second conference win. They're 2-1. They were dead in the water a couple weeks ago. I wouldn't say they're completely out of that, but they're not sinking anymore. They're kind of treading water. So, they at least have a pulse. And so they're 2-1 right now, half game out of first. Jackson State dropped a surprising game to Grambling in terms of, where these two teams were coming into this game. And, I know Grambling people will say, we don't lose to Jackson, so why is it a surprise? But, Grambling was an underdog in this game. Let's just be honest. So that was an upset. And so now we see how Jackson bounces back with another game away from home. This one is a true road game. Like I said, FAMU and won 2 straight. They already talking about distraction committee. So, they really trying to roll out the thick 3,600. and get everything going against JSU. So they feel a little bit better coming into this game than the Rattlers did a couple weeks ago. I don't, again, I don't know. This game could be a little bit more interesting than some may think. Right now, FAMU is scoring 21 points per game. Jackson State 33. Rattlers defensively allowing 34 points per game, and Jackson State is at 21. So I do have a couple concerns about FAMU, especially defensively, because they allowed an offense last week that hadn't really done anything to move the ball up and down the field pretty consistently. They did stand up in the fourth quarter when they needed to and got some stops, but they allowed multiple long drives to an offense that really hadn't done that. They gave a 35 points to offense that really hadn't done that. So, whether that's an aberration or, that's what it is, that's going to be where we look to see how the Rattlers fare defensively, because they're still facing a really good offense. Jacoby Morgan, his health is important here, but Lockhart came in at quarterback after Stoffel came out. Lockhart came in and he led the team to a late touchdown, and really probably barring a play here or there, could have been the winning touchdown. Um, so we'll see how that goes. R.J. Johnson is an underrated quarterback. I think he's still not. He hasn't scratched the surface of what he can be, but I do think that he's showing some things. He's a guy that is been pretty accurate with his passing. Um, and so he's second in the league at 141, 202 yards per game. He has 7 touchdowns, no interceptions, completing 64% of his passes, um, which is basically the second highest completion percentage in the league. He's able to have some big runs against Southern, and the running game came together against Southern. Um, so Jamal Haley had a big game against Southern, 156 yards on the ground, um, and got in the end zone. So, for a team that doesn't really, FAMU doesn't really run the football. Um, they have 233 carries, which is the fewest in the league, but they do have guys that can run it. That's just not what they do. Jackson State run game is always pretty much there, 256 per game, 17 touchdowns. They average 5.9 yards per carry. Jackson State leads the league in rushing defense, 123 yards per game. Rattlers seventh at 171 yards per game. FAMU fourth in passing offense at 239 per game. Jackson State fifth at 232. So both teams, pretty solid with the passing attack. Um, both defenses pretty similar against the pass. Um, neither team has really had a lot of success forcing turnovers through the air. Teams combined for 6 interceptions. Um, I I still think JSU is the favorite in this game, primarily because I think that the running attack should still be there. And in a game like this, I think you need to be able to run the football because you wanna kind of quiet the crowd. Of course, you want to hit a big play here and now and knock that out. But I think if you can consistently run the football, you can grind it out. You get those passes when needed. You're gonna you're gonna have control of this game, and the crowd really won't be a factor. But FAMU, like I said, they're showing signs of life, so you can't count them out. I do think this game may be similar to last season, where this could be a back and forth affair, maybe a couple turnovers in there. Um, Jackson State has had penalty issues. FAMU isn't a really highly penalized team, so that could be a factor here. But I still like Jackson State to win. I think they win. I think they win by about 10. I'm gonna say odd score. I'm gonna say 35-25. Um, but I think this could be a game that goes into the fourth quarter. And if that's the case, then you just never know. But I think Jackson State finds a way to pull this one out on the road. And that takes us to our final game, which is our game of the week. Um, and this is a big game for a lot of different reasons. Bama State heads to Prairie View to take on the Panthers. This game is big because Prairie View is 4-0 in the conference. A win makes them 5-0, obviously, and that keeps their cushion on the West Division, especially if Texas Southern loses. That basically doesn't officially wrap it up, but that pretty much wraps it up because if Texas Southern loses this game and they're at 3-2 and Prairie View's at 5-0, for TSU to have any chance at winning the division, they would need Prairie View to lose 3 games, which would mean Prairie View had to lose out, and then TSU had to win the remainder of their game. So it's not totally locked up, but it puts them a step closer to locking it up. And that means next week that they really, they're 5-0. Next week they win, they're 6-0. They probably, barring losing their last 2 games and TSU doesn't lose anymore, they're pretty much the division champs. So this is a big game for that. Bama State is a big game because they need to keep pace. They're 3-1. They can't afford to drop a game because you drop a game, you're probably gonna need Jack State to lose another couple games, and then you still have to kind of you do have tiebreakers over the other 2 teams with 1 loss because you already beat FAMU, you already beat Bethune. So you kind of good there, but you can't really afford to drop another conference game because you drop another conference game that makes your chances that much more tougher. And I think this is a good matchup between the Prairie View defense and the Bama State offense. Both teams are tops in their respective category. Bama State leads the league in scoring at 41.9 points per game. Prairie View first in scoring defense at 17.3. Something's gonna have to give there. Prairie View's offense, they score about 23.8 points per game, and Bama State gives up about 24 points per game. So that's kind of even. And I think the reason why I feel like that offense of Bama State versus Prairie View defense matchup is huge in this game because I think Prairie View can't afford to try to get into a shootout. So if their defense, for whatever reason, can't keep the Hornets off the board, I don't think that they're gonna be able to keep pace offensively, especially with their style of play. Um, so if that's the case, if Bama State gets upwards of 30 points, I think they win. If Prairie View can keep them below 30 points, which hasn't been done at all this season, I think. Um, if they can do that, then I think Prairie View got a good chance of winning. So I think the number 30 is huge in this game. If Bama State gets to 30, I think they win this game. If they stay under 30, because I do think Prairie View's defense is good enough to do that. If they keep them under 30, then I think the Panthers win. I think it's that cut and dry. Now I will say, it's not impossible for Bama State to win a game with scoring less than 30 points. They just haven't this season. They scored 42, 30, 37, 42, 52, 34, and 56. So they haven't scored lower than 30 points. And that's something to look at. That's something to take into account. And when you look at Prairie View defensively, they haven't really given up that many points like that. So let's look at what the Panthers have did defensively. 21, 27. They did give up 38 to Rice. 24, 13, 12, 3, and 0. So they haven't given up points. Like I said, they've only given up more than 20, 24 points once. And that was the 30, that was the 27 twice, 37, 38 and 27. So they in swag play, they haven't really given up many points 21, 13, 12, and 3. So that right there is a key factor. So, you can look at the yardage, you can look at how these teams get their yards and points, you can look at all of that. But the thing is, one team scores a lot, the other team doesn't allow teams to score a lot. So something's gonna have to give. And I think that's the matchup that really is gonna dictate this game. Alabama State, second in total offense, 483 yards per game. Prairie View, first in total defense, 287 yards per game. Panthers, fifth in total offense, 373 per game. Bama State is fifth in total defense, 366 per game. Both teams solid running the ball. Bama State can do it in multiple ways. Like you saw Jabari Kirkendall had a 100-yard game last week. Andrew Body can run the ball. He's one of the top. He's basically the top rusher in the league. Murray Holzclaw, Carl Ligon, Marcus Harris. They have a ton of guys that can run the football, and they run it well. Like I said, they average 236 yards per game. Prairie View defensively at 146. Um, so that's again another solid matchup. Panthers run the ball too. Lamajay McDowell, Chase Bingman, Connor Wisham, Tevin Carter can run the ball. Um, they average 169 yards per game. Bama State defensively, they give up 172 yards per game. This defense for Bama State hasn't really been what we are used to, but they're still a good defense. They're just not that dominant Bama State defense, but they're still a solid defense. Bama State second in the league passing, 246 per game, 20 touchdowns, only one interception, 69% completion rate. They have a ton of weapons in the passing game. When you look at the leading receivers in the conference, you see Jalen Jones up there. You see Dylan Jajit. You see Asa Greg. You see all these guys, man, that can really make things happen for the Hornets. Um, they have weapons all around. Like I said, their offense is AJ Ajay Harrell. Their offense is very balanced. They can hurt you in any way. And all season long, they've won games in different fashions. They won games throwing the ball a lot. They've won games where they run the ball more. They've had different people lead the team in rushing. They're a very versatile and balanced offense that can cause you problems all over the field. Prairie View defense, they've been really, really sound, and they've been really tough against the pass. Opponents are completing 53% through the air, which is the top mark in the league. 141 yards per game for the opponents through the air. They run a drop 8 at times. So, they're probably going to test the patience of the passing attack. But Bama State can pick you apart with controlled passing. So that is a good matchup. Bama State defense is third against the pass, 191 yards per game. Prairie View passing offense is at 192 yards per game. They can throw the ball. They do have one of the top receivers in the league. So Josiah Rockwell, they have weapons there. Cam Peters has been solid throwing the ball. He had a good game against Southern, over 200 yards passing. This is gonna be I think this is gonna be a really good game to watch. Because it's a contrast in styles. It is, you have tops on offense and tops on defense. And I do think the other matchup is gonna be good too, because you that matchup could honestly be what makes the difference in this game. Um, I really, like I said, I really think this is a close game. I think when I did my full entertainment purposes video, I think the spread was like 10. I don't think it's that. I do like Bama State here, but I think it's gonna be close. Um, and I think Prairie is gonna. I said the number 30 was important. I think Bama State gets right there. I think they get to 30, and I think they win this game 30-20, 30-24. Um, Late touchdown wins this game. It's gonna be interesting. Andrew Body is a Texas kid. A lot of his family are gonna be there, so that could be another thing. He's playing really well. He's got that energy. Probably not even probably conference player of the year. Um, he's having that season that a lot of people expected from him last season before he got injured. So I think this is going to be a good matchup, man, and this is a strong matchup for this week. And I hope it turns out to be a really good game either way, because that matchup is our game of the week. So let's take a quick look at the schedule for next week, just to kind of give you an idea of what's coming. I don't want to run past week 10 and focus on week 11, but it's good to know what's coming up next. Um, because it's always good to know more football. Um, if this thing ever comes up. Here we go. Where we at? No, November 8th is week 11. We got Jackson State at Valley, Bethune-Cookman at Grambling, Prairie View at Alabama A&M, Texas Southern at Bama State, FAMU at Pine Bluff, and Southern at Alcorn. So kind of a cool down week after a couple big games this week. And then we'll continue to move forward. But I think this is going to be a good week of football as usual. I don't think it's going to be boring. Even the weeks where looking at it before the season, you're like, this week only got a couple games. It's not really, not really hitting on much. And the season always still manages to kind of surprise you because swag football is unpredictable at times, and I still think that's going to be the case here. So with that being said, man, I'll be back on Sunday to recap all the action. Like I said, we still bringing you swag smoke. We're just trying to figure out some things. My work schedule has changed, so I'm working nights now. So we're trying to figure out how we can bring it to you, and just keep it locked to the socials, and you'll find out and keep that notification bell on, and you'll find out. So with that being said, I'm your tour guide around the swag Seawells, signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.